The Resident Evil remakes didn't just upgrade the graphics, they rewrote entire storylines, invented characters that never existed, and cut content that fans are still angry about years later. Today, I'm breaking down every major difference between the originals and the remakes, starting with a character who single-handedly turned a zombie game into a tragedy. Lisa Trevor's subplot. Lisa Trevor does not exist in the original 1996 Resident Evil. Zero mention, zero presence. She was created entirely for the 2002 GameCube remake, and somehow she retroactively explains one of the franchise's most iconic viruses. Here's the story. Lisa was the daughter of the architect who designed the Spencer Mansion. Umbrella kidnapped her and subjected her to roughly 20 years of continuous progenitor virus experimentation, starting around 1967. Her body adapted to everything they threw at her, which made her the perfect test subject, because she just wouldn't die. But here's where it gets significant. In 1988, researchers noticed that a unique strain had mutated inside Lisa's body after decades of adaptation. That mutated strain was isolated, and eventually became the foundation for the G-Virus, the same virus that transforms William Birkin into that grotesque nightmare in Resident Evil 2. One addition to a remake quietly rewired the entire franchise timeline, and her boss encounter is unlike anything else in the series. You cannot beat Lisa Trevor through combat. The fight requires you to push 4 pillars off the edge of an arena while she roams freely trying to kill you. Your only option is to stun her temporarily with handgun rounds to buy yourself puzzle-solving time. If you're playing as Jill, Lisa can knock Barry completely off the arena, turning the whole thing into an escort mission layered on top of a puzzle you're already struggling to solve, which is, not ideal. But if Lisa Trevor changed the story, the next edition changed how you play the game entirely. Crimson Heads. In every horror game you've ever played, killing an enemy is a good thing. You shoot the zombie dies, you move on. That's the deal. The 2002 GameCube remake of Resident Evil looked at that deal and said, what if killing the zombie was actually the worst thing you could do? Here's how it works. You shoot a zombie. It drops. You feel great about yourself. You leave the room, go solve a puzzle, come back 20 minutes later, and that same zombie is now standing again, except it's faster, stronger, and its skin has turned red. Congratulations, you just created a Crimson Head. What's happening is the T-Virus mutating the downed corpse, essentially rebooting it into something significantly more dangerous than what you originally killed. More health, more damage, more speed. The thing you put down is now actively harder to deal with than if you just left it alone. Players had exactly 2 ways to prevent this. You could decapitate the zombie, which required specific weapons and rare shotgun shells, or you could burn the corpse using oil canisters. There are roughly 3 oil canister locations in the entire game, enough to permanently eliminate about 12 zombies total. In a mansion full of the undead, 12 is nothing. So what did players do? A lot of them just stopped killing zombies entirely. They dodge past encounters, weave through hallways, and treat every zombie like a piece of furniture to walk around rather than a threat to eliminate, because the math was brutal. Every kill cost ammunition. Every untreated corpse became a future Crimson Head. Every fight was a net loss. The optimal strategy wasn't get good at combat. It was avoid combat completely. That's a psychological shift most games never even attempt, and it only existed in one remake. But if Crimson Heads change how players thought about enemies, the next change altered how players literally saw them. Over-the-shoulder camera. Here's a question the Resident Evil community has been arguing about for over 2 decades. Does horror come from what you can't see? Or from what you can see coming and still can't stop? The original 1998 Resident Evil 2 used fixed pre-rendered camera angles. You'd walk into a hallway and the camera would be mounted near the ceiling, showing you maybe 40% of the room. The other 60%? That was where the zombies lived. This wasn't some genius artistic choice either. The PlayStation 1 literally could not render full 3D environments, so Capcom painted beautiful static backgrounds and bolted the camera to predetermined positions. The limitation became the horror. You couldn't see what was around the corner, and that uncertainty made every room feel like a potential death sentence. The 2019 remake threw all of that out. Built on the RE engine, Capcom planted the camera right behind Leon's shoulder and said good luck. You could now see exactly where threats were, aim precisely at zombie heads, and control your spatial awareness in real time. But here's the thing, Capcom knew they just handed players a massive advantage, so they compensated. Zombies in the Remake are dramatically more aggressive, faster to recover, and can absorb a genuinely absurd amount of damage. The perspective shifted from I can't see the danger to I can see the danger, and I still can't stop it. Two completely different horror philosophies. The 2002 GameCube remake took a middle path, keeping fixed angles but enhancing their cinematography to feel more cinematic and deliberate rather than purely hardware limited. The 2019 and 2020 remakes committed fully to the modern perspective and never looked back. But not everyone was happy. Community members actually modded the 2019 remake to restore classic fixed camera angles and tank controls. People voluntarily gave themselves worse visibility because they missed the dread of not knowing what was ahead, which is, the most Resident Evil thing I've ever heard. But if the camera change made you uncomfortable, wait until you hear what they did with Mr. X. Mr. X's persistent AI. Here's something that should genuinely unsettle you. When you're hiding in the save room, catching your breath, Mr. X isn't in there with you. Save rooms are safe zones. But he's still walking, not frozen, not despawn. He is physically moving through hallways you can't see, and the game is computing his exact position the entire time. The moment you step back out, he could be right there. In the original 1998 game, Mr. X followed predetermined paths and showed up at scripted moments. You could learn his patterns and basically sidestep the threat entirely. The 2019 remake threw all of that in the trash. Remake. Mr. X runs on behavior trees, AI decision systems that evaluate the environment, detect player presence through sound and line of sight, and adapt pursuit tactics in real time. He doesn't follow a script, he makes decisions. If you fire a gun on the east side of the station, he hears it and starts walking toward you. If you sprint down a hallway, he registers the noise and adjusts his route, and because his behavior persists, even off camera, you never truly know where he is. You just know he's somewhere. Now remember the camera shift we talked about earlier. The over-the-shoulder perspective didn't just change exploration, it changed how you fought this thing. Players discovered that shooting Mr. X directly in the face causes him to stagger, a weakness that's only exploitable because the new camera allows precise facial targeting. You literally could not do that with fixed camera angles. The perspective created the vulnerability. But here's the kicker. His aggression scales with proximity. The closer he gets, the faster and more violent his behavior becomes, peaking at point-blank range where he's basically swinging at you like you owe him money. And when he finally mutates into Super Tyrant during the climax, watching him go feral feels personal after hours of slow, methodical stalking. The result is a police station that never feels safe. Not because of what you can see, but because of what you can't. But if Mr. X taught players to fear what's chasing them, the next mechanic taught them to fight back with whatever they had on hand. Defensive items. In the original 1998 Resident Evil games, getting grabbed by a zombie meant one thing: you took the damage. No counter, no escape button, no last second save. A zombie latched onto you, chewed on your neck for a bit, and you just had to sit there and accept it like a bad haircut. Zero recourse. The game punished you for letting an enemy get close, and your only option was to not let that happen in the first place. The 2002 remake changed everything. Capcom introduced defensive items, a reactive combat system that gave players tools specifically designed to activate during enemy grabs. Combat knives, hand grenades, and flash grenades could all be deployed the moment a zombie got hold of you. Grab a knife? Your character jams it straight into the zombie's skull. Have a grenade? You literally stuff it into the zombie's mouth. The zombie stumbles away, and then the grenade detonates, which is, not ideal for the zombie. But here's where the real tension lived. Every defensive item occupied an inventory slot. An inventory space in classic Resident Evil is basically a currency more valuable than gold. That knife sitting in your pocket? That's a healing herb you didn't bring. That flash grenade you're saving? That's ammunition you left behind in a storage box 3 rooms ago. The system turned vulnerability into a resource management question. Do you prepare for failure by carrying reactive tools, or invest everything into proactive offense and pray nothing touches you? The 2019 Resident Evil 2 remake evolved this with sub-weapons. Knives now had durability, meaning they could break after repeated use. But here's the twist. You could walk up to a zombie corpse, pull the knife back out, and reuse it. Grenades stayed single use, gone forever the moment you deployed them, so suddenly you're not just deciding whether to carry defensive items. You're deciding which type, calculating durability versus permanence, and factoring in whether you'll remember to retrieve that knife from a room you might never revisit. But if you think inventory anxiety is bad, wait until you hear about what the Resident Evil 3 remake decided to remove entirely. The removal of the clock tower. In the original Resident Evil 3, you pick up a postcard within the first 20 minutes of the game. It's a picture of the clock tower, and from that moment, the game tells you exactly where you're headed. It becomes this landmark in your mind, this destination you're working toward, while Nemesis is breathing down your neck and Raccoon City is falling apart around you. And when you finally got there, it delivered. The clock tower was a massive location with real exploration depth. You could enter from the front or the rear, and depending on which way you came in, you'd find different paths, different items, and different encounters. It meant two players could talk about the same section of the game and have genuinely different experiences. That's not filler. That's hours of content designed around player choice and replayability. The 2020 remake deleted it. Not redesigned, not condensed. Deleted. The clock tower, one of the most iconic locations in the entire original game, simply does not exist in the remake. What was once a sprawling multipath exploration area got replaced with linear progression through alternative locations that funnel you from point A to point B with zero deviation. We're talking about hours of gameplay just gone, replaced with nothing of equivalent scope. Here's where it gets complicated. The Resident Evil 2 remake came out a year earlier and was universally praised for expanding on the original. It added content, it deepened the experience. Then the Resident Evil 3 remake arrived and did the opposite, contracting the source material and cutting one of its most beloved locations entirely. The backlash was severe enough that modders started building the Resident Evil 3 Last Escape mod specifically to restore cut content, including the clock tower. Fans literally investing their own time and labor to put back what Capcom took out. I don't know what to tell you. When your community is doing unpaid work to fix your game, something went wrong. But if the clock tower removal hurt the game's exploration, wait until you hear what the remake did to its combat, the perfect dodge mechanic. The RE3 remake handed players one of the most satisfying combat tools in the entire franchise, and then made it nearly impossible to use. The perfect dodge required you to press the button within roughly 0.2 seconds of an enemy attack connecting. That's not a generous window. That's barely a blink. Press it too early, too late, doesn't matter what direction you're holding, you're eating damage, but when you nailed it, the screen flashed white, time slowed to a crawl, and Jill could free aim at anything in the room with a boosted critical hit chance. It turned a panic moment into a power fantasy for about 2 seconds before the game reminded you that you're surrounded by things that want to eat your face. Here's the thing most players never realized. There weren't just two outcomes. The game actually had 5 distinct dodge variations hiding under one button. The lucky dodge happened when you sprinted past enemies without pressing anything, basically the game throwing you a freebie. The basic dodge gave you a quick positional adjustment. The perfect dodge was the white flash, slow motion reward. The emergency dodge kicked in during desperate last-second situations. And then there was the perfect counterattack, triggered by holding aim immediately after a perfect dodge, letting you fire back during the slow motion window for maximum damage. Most players experienced maybe 2 of those 5 types and assumed that was the whole system. It was a hidden depth mechanic buried under a skill ceiling that the average playthrough never reached. But here's where it gets genuinely absurd. The community discovered that the perfect dodge was actually more consistent on higher difficulties. On Inferno, enemies attack so frequently and aggressively that the timing window became paradoxically easier to hit because you had more opportunities to practice and the attack animations were more readable. The mechanic literally worked better when the game was trying harder to kill you, which is, not ideal from a design standpoint. But if the dodge was about split-second timing with your bare hands, wait until you hear what the RE4 remake did with a kitchen knife. Knife durability and parrying. Here's a fun question for you. What if I told you one of the most controversial mechanics in the Resident Evil remakes exists not because it makes the game better for most players, but because a tiny percentage of people are too good at the game? The 2019 RE2 remake introduced breakable combat knives, and the system was more nuanced than people give it credit for. Durability only decreased when you used the knife defensively during grab escapes. You could slash open every box in the police station, stab every crate in your path, and your knife wouldn't lose a single point of durability. But the second you jammed it into a zombie's throat to break free, that blade started ticking toward death. Then the RE4 remake came along in 2023 and said, you know what, let's do it again. Let's do it. Despite the community making it very clear they weren't thrilled the first time, Capcom reintroduced breakable knives and bolted on a full parry mechanic. Now Leon could deflect incoming attacks with perfectly timed knife swings. Looked incredible. Felt incredible. Ate your knife alive. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting. The parry system created a resource hierarchy most players never consciously thought about but constantly navigated. Every time an enemy wound up for a swing, you had a split-second decision. Do you parry, save yourself the health damage, but burn knife durability? Or do you tank the hit, pop a green herb, and preserve the knife for something worse down the road? You're running a tiny invisible economy in your head during every fight. The prevailing community theory is that knife durability exists primarily to prevent knife-only challenge runs. Without it, skilled players could theoretically clear the entire game with nothing but a combat knife, completely trivializing the difficulty. So Capcom introduced a system that punishes every single player for the sins of roughly 12 speedrunners, which is, not ideal, but grudgingly, the math checks out. The parry system is legitimately satisfying, the resource decisions add real depth, and the optimization puzzle gives combat a layer of strategy the originals never had. But if knife durability feels like a personal attack, wait until you see how the remakes treated some of your favorite side characters. Expanded roles for side characters. In the original 1998 Resident Evil 2, Marvin Braina exists for roughly 90 seconds. He's lying on the floor of the RPD, he tells you the city's gone to hell, he hands you a keycard, and then he's basically furniture. Tutorial NPC energy at its finest. The 2019 remake looked at that and said, we can do better. Remake Marvin is up on his feet, walking you through the police station, helping with puzzles, giving you context about what happened to his colleagues. He's wounded, clearly deteriorating, but still pushing through. You spend enough time with him that he stops being the guy who gives you the keycard and starts being someone you genuinely like, which is exactly why his zombification hits like a truck. In the original, finding zombie Marvin was just another obstacle. Walk into a room, oh look, he turned. Put him down. Move on. In the remake, you fought alongside this man. You've watched him get weaker. You've heard him tell you to go on without him. And then you come back and he's gone, replaced by something wearing his uniform. That's not a gameplay encounter anymore. That's a funeral. But Marvin wasn't the only character who got the expansion treatment. The remake introduced an entirely new scene of Leon and Claire meeting at a gas station before everything goes sideways. This scene didn't exist in any form in the original. It gives both characters a moment of normalcy before the city tears their lives apart, and it recontextualizes every interaction they have afterward. Claire's relationship with Sherry Birkin got similar attention. The original game made protecting Sherry feel like an obligation. The remake made it feel earned. You watch Claire build rapport with this terrified kid, comfort her, promise her things are going to be okay. By the time you're risking your life for Sherry, you want to. Not because the game told you to, but because the writing made you care. But if emotional depth is what the remakes gave with one hand, player agency is what they took away with the other. The removal of live selection. Here's a feature that, on paper, should have caused a riot. Live selection was a mechanic unique to the original 1999 Resident Evil 3, where timed dialogue choices would interrupt cutscenes without warning. A prompt would appear, a timer would start counting down, and you had to pick one of two options before it expired. If you froze up, the game picked for you, and the default was almost always the worse option. It appeared at least 9 times throughout the original game, and each choice created genuine branching consequences. Pick one option early on, and you'd find different items later. Pick the other, and entire sequences would play out differently. That's a lot of replayability baked into a single mechanic. The 2020 remake removed all of it, every single branching choice, gone. Replaced with linear cutscenes that play the same way every time. No timer, no pressure, no consequence. And here's where it gets interesting. The community barely flinched. Compare that to the clock tower removal, which generated genuine outrage, forum threads going on for pages, modders trying to rebuild the entire location from scratch. Live selection's removal got something closer to a collective shrug, which tells you something fascinating about what players actually value. On paper, 9 branching narrative paths creating distinct playthroughs sounds like a massive feature. In practice, most players apparently cared more about losing a physical space they could explore than losing choices they could make. Spatial freedom over narrative agency. The ability to walk through a building and discover things on your own terms mattered more than picking dialogue options during cutscenes, no matter how consequential those options were. It's a slightly melancholic realization. Live selection was genuinely clever design, a mechanic that made cutscenes interactive years before other games figured that out, but cleverness doesn't always translate to emotional attachment. Sometimes the thing players remember isn't the choice they made, it's the room they walked through. But if the remakes took things away, they also added entirely new systems that the originals never had. And the Resident Evil 4 remake might have the most satisfying one attached case: upgrades and charms. The Resident Evil 4 remake quietly did something nobody expected. It turned inventory management into an actual progression system, and somehow nobody complained. The original RE4 had the attaché case, and it was already satisfying. A grid-based inventory where every weapon, herb, and grenade occupied specific squares, and you had to rotate and rearrange items like a Tetris board to make everything fit. The remake took that concept and expanded it into a full upgrade path. Players could find larger cases throughout the game or purchase upgrades from the merchant, gradually increasing their storage space as the campaign escalated. The spatial puzzle element stayed intact, meaning you were still rotating shotguns and sliding grenades into corners, trying to squeeze one more item in, which honestly is one of the most universally satisfying feelings in gaming. There's something deeply primal about making everything fit perfectly into a grid. But here's where it gets clever. The remake introduced charms, small passive enhancement items that didn't exist in the original game at all. Players could equip up to 3 simultaneously, and each one provided a specific boost: increased ammunition drop rates, improved herb effectiveness, enhanced money drops from enemies. On their own, each charm felt like a minor convenience. Combined strategically, they enabled genuine build crafting. And that's the part that snuck past everyone. Players running minimalist ammo conservation builds would stack ammunition charms to keep their reserves healthy without buying rounds. Healing-focused builds prioritized herb effectiveness, stretching fewer green herbs across longer stretches. Resource-gathering runs loaded up on money charms, turning every encounter into a payday for merchant upgrades. It was RPG-like customization grafted onto survival horror, and it worked because it was entirely optional. You could ignore charms completely and get the default experience. Zero punishment for not engaging with the system. But if you did engage, you had genuine reasons to replay the campaign with different loadouts, optimizing for different strategies each time. That's elegant design. Reward the players who dig deeper without alienating the ones who just want to shoot cultists and move on. But if the charm system was a quiet, mechanical evolution, the next change was anything but subtle. Real-time dismemberment tech. Here's something that's going to change the way you look at every zombie you've ever shot in a Resident Evil remake. The gore isn't just there to gross you out, it's an information system, and it's arguably the most sophisticated mechanical innovation in the entire franchise. Let me explain. In the original 1990s games, dismemberment was basically a coin flip. You hit a zombie enough times, crossed a fixed damage threshold, and a predetermined animation played. Arm falls off, head pops, same animation every time, completely disconnected from what you actually did. The 2019 RE2 remake threw all of that out and replaced it with something genuinely insane. Every bullet interacts with a multi-layered damage model that independently tracks clothing, skin, flesh, and bone. These aren't cosmetic layers. They have actual depth. A shotgun blast at point-blank range might shred clothing and tear through surface tissue but stop at muscle. That same shotgun from farther back could penetrate deeper due to spread pattern, punching clean through to bone. The game is running a contextual ballistic simulation in real time, adjusting wound geometry based on weapon type, distance, and shot placement. And here's the part nobody talks about. That system isn't spectacle, it's feedback. A zombie missing its left arm moves differently than one with both arms intact. A zombie with a destroyed jaw lunges differently than one with a shattered kneecap. You're reading enemy state through visual damage without a single UI element telling you anything. The gore is the health bar, which makes the 2020 RE3 remake even more frustrating. The dismemberment system was noticeably downgraded. Less layered, less dynamic, less responsive. The community picked up on it immediately, and the consensus was damning. It felt like evidence of rushed development, and that reaction tells you everything about what Capcom accidentally accomplished. They set a benchmark so high with RE2's gore fidelity that anything less felt like a regression. The community didn't treat real-time dismemberment as a bonus feature. They treated it as the standard. So the next time you blow a zombie's jaw clean off and watch it stumble forward with a lopsided lunge, remember, that's not Capcom being gratuitous. That's a real-time damage simulation, feeding you tactical information through the most visceral delivery system imaginable. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.